Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Well, earlier this week, the 129 participants of Deloitte's Best Managed Companies programme were honoured at its annual awards ceremony. So what sets these companies apart? Brian Murphy, lead partner for Deloitte's Best Managed Companies programme, joins us now to tell us more. Brian, before we discuss the detail of the programme, you're actually a Wexford man.
Good morning, Karl, and thanks a million for having us here today. I am indeed, yeah. So I went to school in Bunclody, FCJ Bunclody, and from there then I went to Dublin. I'm currently an audit and assurance partner in Deloitte, and as you referenced, I also lead our Best Managed Companies programme. Prior to that, I worked in Mazars Chartered Accountants, where I trained as a chartered accountant, and then I also had a 4-star pizza franchise for a number of years where I kind of stepped out, I suppose, outside of professional services. And
16 years ago this year, Deloitte actually introduced their Best Managed Companies programme. Tell us a bit about it, and what was the objective of doing it?
So I suppose, the mission really of the programme was that we could spotlight and elevate outstanding private businesses who our independent judging panel felt met the criteria of being a best managed company. And that criteria is very much set through a global framework, which was set with our Canadian colleagues back 31 years ago.
And Brian, since then, the Deloitte Best Managed Companies programme is now operating in almost 50 countries across the world.
It's been a fantastic journey to see this now as a programme, now having nearly 1,500 companies across 50 countries. So it's very much becoming now, I suppose, a global phenomenon, which companies and private companies are really keen and interested to be part of.
And I'd like to know what the difference between the Deloitte Best Managed Companies programme is when compared to the EY Entrepreneur of the Year programme.
Yeah, sure, Karl. A great question, I suppose, a question companies would often ask us. Really, our programme is all about celebrating the success of a management team. It's about a best managed company, and that's a team of people, not just, I suppose, an entrepreneur or one individual. And the criteria that the companies are assessed against really ensure that there is that wider senior management team. So it's not just about that kind of one individual person, because really to be a best managed company, it's more than just one individual.
So what is the eligibility criteria for companies to take part in the programme?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose at a very basic level, it needs to be an Irish company. And for that, what that means to us is it's a company that's either managed or controlled in Ireland. Typically, it's incorporated. So it's like a company that's incorporated in the country, and it needs to be privately owned. And that could be either a family business, could be owned by a private individual, or it could also, and we have a number of companies that are also private equity backed. Turnover criteria is 25 million. So you must have at least turnover of 25 million.
And what does the application process look like for this competition?
Sure. So I suppose your starting point is there's quite a robust application that needs to happen in year one as you apply to the programme. And that's done through our online portal. And you're essentially assessed against 4 different pillars and criteria. First of those is strategy. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. The second area is around culture and commitment. Your third area is around capabilities and innovation. And the fourth area is around financials and governance. You're assigned an individual from Deloitte, so that will be an experienced director or partner who will support that company through the process. So the actual application in itself, but also be able to give you guidelines, be able to benchmark against what they've seen in other companies. And we try also to match up individuals that have sector or specific industry experience to really ensure that, I suppose, application process is as seamless as possible, and that we make sure the best application is what makes its way into our system. Once then the application is in the system, we then have a judging panel, and we have 8 judges on our panel. They're independent to Deloitte, and they assess then the company under those 4 criteria.
So what level of time commitment would be required by a company to complete the application process?
Yeah, great question. Probably the first question we're asked actually by companies. And being honest, if it's streamlined and done professionally and you have the support of our Deloitte coach, it's done within a number of days, being honest. We find the best companies already have a lot of this information documented, so they already know what their strategy is. They're very clear on what their capabilities and what they're doing from a culture perspective. So it's really making sure that all is just filtered through the process, and then our coach then from Deloitte will really support you in ensuring you really put your best foot forward, to make sure that that's what kind of ends up in the application.
So there's now 129 companies in the programme. Talk to us about the benefits that they have derived from it.
Yeah, sure. And it's a question we constantly survey our companies on to ensure they're getting the maximum benefit from it. And there's probably three key, I suppose, benefits that our companies kind of say to us they get. The firstly is definitely the brand recognition and the market recognition. More and more companies within the program are internationalizing, and they're finding having that kind of stamp of approval and being a international now best managed company is really helping them when it comes to proposals, when it comes to tenders, etc. The second area is definitely the actual coaching process itself. So because you are, I suppose, aligned to someone within Deloitte with expertise in your particular field and sector, you get the best of them in terms of understanding what's going on in the market, what's going on in the sector, being able to benchmark what it is you do against maybe other companies, but also even just the discipline around actually looking at this annually. Because as I mentioned earlier, as a new winner, you go through a fairly robust process. As a requalifying company each year, you go through a simpler process, but very much, I suppose, a check-in on each of those four pillars that I mentioned earlier. So it really keeps, I suppose, companies, as they say themselves, honest. It makes sure that they're doing that strategic review each year, and it kind of keeps them, I suppose, online and themselves. And the third area is definitely the network, right? We have 129 excellent, fantastic businesses in that program, and we get those to meet together formally in terms of a number of events that we would have during the year, but also informally, a lot of those CEOs, CFOs, C-suite of those companies would get to know one another and would very much have their own kind of network then of companies. And they see great benefit in that.
So what are these 129 companies doing that others just aren't?
Yeah, and it probably comes to kind of maybe say this year 3 key areas that I suppose our judges would have kind of noted that they really see coming through. The first one is a really clear strategy. A strategy that kind of stretches the company. It's not just words. It's something that's felt down through the organization. So it's well communicated. It's very clear where the company wants to go. And behind that, there's a real project plan and a real, I suppose, delineation of things that need to happen to make sure that they get where it is that they want to go. So that tends to be the very first thing that needs to be there. I would say the second thing that we see every single year is these companies are brilliant from an innovation perspective. And innovation means different things to different businesses. So sometimes that innovation is in the actual product or service. So the idea of it being something that's very different to what others have done. In other cases, the product or service looks quite maybe similar to what other businesses do, but it's how it is they produce that product or service. So they're so innovative in terms of use of technology. If it's AI, if it's robotics, there's a mirror of different kind of ways, I suppose, companies can be so innovative, and you just see that in bucket loads in the companies that are in the program. And the third is probably around kind of the people and how it is that they use their people. How it is that they're continuing to retain, how it is that they're continuing to support and continue to develop their people. We see just so much in our applications from these companies in terms of what it is that they're doing for their people that I don't feel is necessarily across the board, if you looked at other Irish businesses. So
what are they doing for people?
Like every single one of these companies has such a big emphasis in terms of retention. And actually, when we looked at, for example, some of our survey that we had produced, one of the kind of actually number one on the list of challenges for those companies was around retention of people. But to the back of that, then every single one of the companies has massive retention policies. So everything from learning and development is probably number one on the list. So, and that's not just 1 hour, 2 hour courses. That is sending senior management to very reputable universities, very reputable institutes to do leadership courses. It is making sure that there is really clear definition around what does promotion look like and how is it that I get kind of to the next level within the organizations. It's providing all of the ancillary type benefits that are outside of compensation. So that's everything. For example, flexibility is very high on that list. So in our survey, flexibility and providing flexibility to employees was very, very high on the list. And then other, I suppose, while not compensation, but other benefits. So the likes of health insurance, gym memberships, wellness type benefits, all of those type of, I suppose, ancillary kind of things are very, very important to employees.
And whilst the eligibility criteria from a turnover perspective is minimum €25 million, I note that a lot of the companies that take part in the programme have turnover of between 80 and 100 million per year. Talk to us about how they got to that. Is it through organic growth or through acquisition? And what type of industries are these businesses operating in?
Yeah, no, that is very correct. So, I'll take maybe the second part of the question first. In terms of the split of those 129 companies, so we've about 37% of those are in the construction, engineering, manufacturing space. We have about another 34%, which are your consumer industries, so everything from kind of retail to hospitality. TMT, which is our technology, media and telecommunications businesses, represent about 24%. And then there'll be a smaller number, then about 6% that would be in the life sciences space. In terms of, I suppose, how have they kind of got to where they got in terms of kind of growth? Certainly, there are a cohort of companies, and even when we surveyed the companies this year and around how is it that they are going to grow, 77% of those companies said to us that it is going to be organically by developing new products and services. And quite a cohort of those 80 million to 100 million companies, that's where they kind of started out. And to be honest with you, they really put in the hard yards to continually to develop the product or the service it is that they offer. But there's also, I suppose, other trends that we're also seeing. So certainly growth in headcount is obviously very key. So of these companies in the program, 63% see that in the next 5 years to grow, they're going to have to seriously increase their headcount and have been doing so also over the last number of years. But the other two that have been very important have been international expansion and also M&A. And if I take the international expansion in particularly our companies in the E&RI space, so our engineering companies, our manufacturing companies, they certainly see the way for them to scale quickly is international expansion. And seeing a lot of that within our companies. In our survey, that was 56% of our companies said that that's where they're going in the next 5 years. And M&A, absolutely, definitely a trend, more so actually as part of the international expansion. So yes, looking at other Irish companies, that makes sense. And actually in the past, we've had a number of companies within the program who have merged and acquired one another, which was obviously very interesting. But as part of an international expansion plan, sometimes the M&A route has been a good kind of, I suppose, take. And again, in our survey, we see 53% of our companies are going to go on a trajectory in terms of looking at M&A in the next 5 years.
And from the 129 companies in the program, what stands out in terms of what they are doing when it comes to artificial intelligence implementation within their organizations?
Yeah, sure. We actually had an event on this particular area during the year with our companies, because it was definitely completely forefront to the minds of these businesses that AI is, something they have to consider and they have to look at. Back to just looking at the kind of survey that we had with those businesses, 59% of the businesses said that the key innovation they're going to go and look at is AI and the whole area of machine learning. What we're finding probably currently is that there's a lot of talking around it, a lot of, if you like, learning as to what it is AI and machine learning can do for the companies. And I think a lot of those businesses are probably now at a stage of kind of selection and then kind of implementation over the next 12 to 24 months. But I think a steep learning curve it has been, I think, then over the last kind of number of years. And
what are these companies saying in terms of challenges on the horizon for them?
Yeah, key challenge was and still is staff retention. And interestingly, that has probably been top of the list for the last number of years. Actually, it was obviously a big issue during COVID and then subsequent to COVID. So that's still top of our list. 67% of companies saying that is their number one issue. Supply chain, still an issue in particular sectors, particularly manufacturing and some of our consumer businesses. We would have thought actually at this stage that potentially that might have been lower, but it's interesting to see that it is kind of still coming out quite highly on our list. And then I suppose following kind of in quick succession then from there, environmental and sustainability issues. it's very high on all of these companies' radars. They're doing a lot in this space, to be fair, but probably kind of more to do and probably challenges and around that. And then cybersecurity, certainly on the list. Companies have had challenges on that in the past. Some of our companies, really looking at that and looking at their infrastructures to make sure that is safe. And I think, tying into maybe the growth that we talked about earlier, companies need capital to be able to do that. They need financing, and 24% of our companies surveyed within the Best Managed Companies group would look at interest rates and kind of the availability of financing as been a potential challenge for them in the future.
And you mentioned sustainability. On that very topic, are many of the companies adequately prepared for the new sustainability reporting requirements?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question again, because it's so forefront to all of these companies at the moment. What I would say on it is, these companies are very, very aware of sustainability. And in terms of the marking criteria and been assessed as best managed companies, it's throughout each of those 4 pillars I mentioned earlier, right? So it's so important that the judging panel can see that it's on the minds of the senior management within the organizations. And we can definitely see that when it comes to innovation, it comes to kind of priorities, they're putting that top of their list. So green technologies, what they need to do in terms of sustainability is there. Where I think the challenge is going to lie is around the actual reporting element of this. A lot of these companies will come into scope in terms of the new CSRD regulations in 2025. That is a relatively small window of time to get to a place where they have to go through quite an onerous and detailed set of regulations to ensure that they're going to meet those criteria. And I think that's probably an area where I think once companies are beginning to look at this new regulation, they're realizing that while they've done so much work in this space, there is definitely a piece of work to be done when it's coming to collating all of this to a place where it can be a sustainability report, which is what is going to be required to be reported on then, as I said, in 2025.
Brian, finally, if any business owner listening this morning would like to get involved in the Best Managed Companies programme by Deloitte, how can they do so?
So definitely starting point is to look at our website. So Deloitte.ie/best managed companies. There will also be a number of PR and media publications over the next number of weeks, and also following our event that we had on Thursday night where we awarded the 129 Best Managed Companies with their award. And certainly as well, if they want to reach out to myself or any of the team, we can give details around that as well.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Brian Murphy, lead partner from Deloitte's Best Managed Companies programme, and I would certainly encourage eligible companies to consider taking part in this programme.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.